Hi everyone, and a very warm welcome to People Matters TV. This is a weekly show bringing HR leaders, functional leaders, analysts, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders of the whole ecosystem to really with the objective of redefining what the future of talent and work is all about. There's so much disruption, there's so much of experimentation happening in the different functions of HR, and this weekly show aspires to bring all these leaders together for provocative conversations that helps us push the needle forward in our organizations. So today's our first show, so I'm very excited to welcome our panelists today. So we have So-Young Kang, he's the founder and CEO of Gnowbe. So-Young, a very warm welcome.
Thank you very much. Happy to be here.
Thank you. We have Bitasta Roy Mehta. She's the author of Have a Think. Bitasta, very warm welcome.
Thank you very much. Pleasure to be here.
And we have Raman Sidhu. He's the Global Head at Learning of Shell. Welcome, Raman.
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Esther.
Very warm welcome to the three of you. And a special thank you for accepting our request for our first show.
It's a first time for us as well. I don't know for the rest of you. Definitely a first time for me.
Same as well.
Yeah, besides work, I think outside work, this is really exciting because while we get onto panels elsewhere in face-to-face meetings, this is really unique, and I compliment you guys for taking this step. So yeah, I look forward to the conversation. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So the objective of today's conversation, as all of you have seen the theme and the topic, future-proofing employees. I think the more I speak to CEOs and CHROs, I think the shift of mindset of really providing security of jobs has really shifted into providing security of careers or security of knowledge that goes beyond just the employment with the organization today. But it's really about enabling that employee, regardless of what will happen to his job or her job in that particular organization, to really look at shifting the paradigms of learning. So I'm going to start with the first question. So-Young, to you. So So-Young is, besides being the CEO, founder of Gnowbe, she's also a serial entrepreneur and the author of Inside Out, Conversations about Leadership and Innovation. So So-Young, I'm going to start with the first question to you on what is the one thing that has completely shifted when business are asking to L&D heads? What is the one thing that has completely changed on that ask?
Yeah, no, I think it's a really good question. And I think, Esther, like you said, there's actually a massive transformation happening in terms of mindsets and really what is the role of L&D and around people. And so I think we are in a very wonderful time, actually, in the fact that people actually really do matter. And not just because it's behind you, but I think the idea of human capital development and management, especially in the age of robotics, machine, AI, is actually the importance of what is it that makes us uniquely human. So I think that the businesses are definitely looking now to L&D to really raise the game and to be a strategic thought partner and to be invited to that table to be discussing how do we develop the capabilities, not just for today, but for the future?
Yeah.
How do we actually reskill and upskill? And so I think there is a greater demand now for L&D practitioners and HR people to really, in some ways, elevate their game.
Yeah.
So that they're really being able to have that strategic conversation with the business now, because it's absolutely critical. So what is going to be the man versus machine roles? And as things get replaced, how do we upskill ourselves so that we're empowered, not disempowered and dehumanized, but how are we empowered through technology?
Wonderful. So I love the optimist answer that we start with, So-Young. So thank you so much. So adding, Bitasta, I'm going to request you to add into So-Young's point as well. So Bitasta is the author of Have a Think, Practical Guide of Evidence-Based HR, and she brings tremendous experience, over 18 years experience working with consulting, designing people solutions actually in organizations like Nielsen, CTG, and Mercer. So Bitasta, what have you seen that ask evolving towards? And what will you say if you have to say, what is the number one ask for business when they go and look at the L&D leader and say, okay, this is the expectation I have from you? What will be that number one expectation?
I think, like So-Young said, I think one of the key things that would shift is what needs to shift is the mindset.
Yeah.
Human beings were never meant to be very tactical, in my opinion. So the three things that stand out, and from whatever readings I've been doing, are the three characteristics, as I call them. One would be the strategic thinking, the second would be imagination, and the third is creative analytics. And for me, evidence-based HR approach, as well as the ability of an organization to build an innovative ecosystem. Not, I steer away from the word culture for
Yeah.
many reasons, but ecosystem, which values, understands individuality.
Yeah.
At the same time, provides a supporting structure and openness and inclusion for diverse sets of minds.
Yeah.
That is very critical in my mindset. The other thing, which I'd always talk about evidence-based HR, is the three things which are going to be important are where human skills are going to be required are the decision making, planning, and again strategy. And if you look at what will help us make the decisions, I think we are shifting with the help of technology, is making decisions based on evidence, making decisions based on big data analytics, making decisions based on data, essentially. So these are the shifts. And one of the key, like So-Young clearly mentioned, one of the key things, the HR function, which is going to be an ask from the business, is going to be reskilling the existing employable workforce so that we maintain economic as well as social cohesion, which is up for a challenge at the moment in both developed and developing economies.
So Vitasta, I'm going to ask you just a clarification question. So you said three characteristics. First one was strategic thinking. Third was creative analytics. What was
imagination. And that is something, that can't be injected into somebody. It's like the way our brains are wired, right? And unless we provide supportive culture where, success is rewarded and celebrated, but failures is also not rewarded, but also tolerated.
Yeah.
So that people take more risks in doing different things. That's very critical.
So I'm going to come to you for some more questions about how do we nurture that imagination ecosystem as well. So Raman, the diversity of this group, I think it's amazing because Raman represents the L&D practitioner. He heads ODA and learning globally for the commercial part of the business at Shell, and he brings tremendous experience in not only in learning but also in sales, marketing, and HR. So it's great to have a business leader with an operations background and now with HR and learning. It's a pleasure to have you with us, Raman. What is your experience as a practitioner on how you've seen, because you've seen business, you've been in delivery, you've been in sales, now you're actually servicing business with your L&D and OD intervention. So what is really the one thing that you've seen shifting when it comes to business ask?
Thank you. I think it's a very relevant question in today's times. And I think when I go and speak with my learning and OD colleagues outside Shell, and when I speak with them at conferences, one of the questions that keeps coming back is how do we measure return on investment on learning and development? And it's a fascinating question. So I actually start with disappointing them that there is actually no return on learning and development investments. And the reason I say it is because we can look at three pillars, in terms of how do we construct this. On the left-hand side of the pillar is a competence-based model where you look at what are the key competencies, then you map those competencies to roles and people are assessed, and then their development needs are met. And of course, we are hoping through the process, we'll build an organization which is capable and we'll improve business results. Yeah. So that's an assumption. And I like to challenge that with another assumption, which is let's look at the right side of the pillar, which is the business performance.
Yeah.
When the starting point is business performance, be it at a strategic level or at a tactical level, there are different things that our CEOs and the leadership is chasing. When you start to write at least top 5 of them, what you want to do is to look at what are the predictors of that performance. Yeah. So if I want to grow my market share by 10%, or if I want to sort of make my brand salience the highest in particular market, or if I want employee engagement to XYZ level, top quartile as an example, you start to then work on what will predict this performance. And what could predict this performance will look like, for example, I need to have a brand which is strong. I need to appeal to millennials. I could do product innovation. I can have an ecosystem where there is a lot of internal ideation happening in the company and so on and so forth. So there can be many predictors of performance. What L&D needs to use is to integrate data and analytics to actually look at a correlation between this predictor of performance and the business performance.
Yeah.
And once you can establish that, then you can go to your CEO and say, look, whatever you want to achieve this year and years ahead, there are 3 things that must happen in the organization which are clearly predicting performance. L&D and then can go back and design interventions which are correlated with not the final output, but the predictors of performance. And if you can correlate that to an extent of 0.6, 0.7, if that happens, then I think you have a very solid business case to walk into your CEO's office saying, we are doing stuff that is moving the dot.
Yeah.
We are contributing to the growth and innovation that the organization is expecting.
Yeah.
And I think then the whole conversation on return on investment, actually, you can throw it out of the window.
Yeah.
That's where I am in my organization.
So I would love to double click on that element that you just raised about getting the buy-in from the stakeholders, especially the business stakeholders. And I'd love to hear an example from each one of you in terms of, maybe one particular business that in your case, Bitasta and So-Young can be about a client you're working with or you worked before. Raman, we'd love to hear a real case study, if that's possible, on one business unit that you were able to use analytics to identify those predictors, and then a design go in place, and hence they were able to impact business. It would be fantastic. At least 1 or 2 examples, if we may. Whoever wants to share.
I mean, I'll let the ladies go first, but I'm happy to share it because I've got lots of examples from my business. Yeah.
I'm happy to listen to your examples of.
Yeah. We'll go to So-Young and Bitasta. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, so I think let me pick the first example. We did recently a study of what makes a sales professional successful in his or her job. Yeah, so we picked up data from the LMS, where all the learning programs are sort of fired from. We looked at the engagement scores of the last few years. We looked at actual business performance. And then the 4th database we looked at was the coaching data we were capturing over the years. When we put this data together, we built a hypothesis, in terms of, okay, we feel that these are few factors which can actually influence sales performance. And then our team started to write algorithms, and we tested some of these hypotheses, a couple of them.
Yeah.
Well, surprisingly, surprise, 2 things came out very clear. One was not a surprise, the other was.
Okay.
So it said team leadership, the quality of your leadership and whoever is actually running that show is crucial to sales performance.
Yeah. Yeah.
And the second one was, in our case, people who are inherently organized and can structure their day well actually tend to do well in sales functions. And we had to look at a number of other things which were happening in the organizations. For example, we were running a host of learning programs. We were doing lots of daily meetings, weekly meetings, and monthly meetings. What this has led to is that we are now redefining the profile, or what we call the challenger profile, of our sales professionals, and what makes them tick. And the second myth was, there is no difference between a male or a female sales professional in terms of effectiveness. There is absolutely no difference. It's a myth. So I think that's an example where I can sort of be proud of what we've learned, and we are now deploying it with our sales force globally.
Wonderful, fantastic. Thanks, Raman, for that example.
No, I love it. It actually triggered an example that I can share from a client we were working with in insurance.
Yeah.
And I think one of the ways, also related to sales performance, was we were looking at the impact of sales performance and client retention.
Yeah.
Based on digital learning, on e-learning, because obviously we do mobile learning. So we wanted to see, is there really a business impact? And basically, from the analysis, you can see that the top quartile performers were actually spending 5 times more time in digital learning. So they were accessing the digital platform much more than the average salesperson. And that was a direct correlation then to, I believe it was 22% higher net income. And then I think it was something like almost 20% higher client retention. So the business ROI is pretty significant. So they were able to close more deals, bigger deals, and retain them longer because they were actually learning. And it makes sense because a lot of the learning is around product training.
Yeah.
So how can I sell a product that I don't know? and confidence building. And another example was where, we had clients, we have a lot of academic clients as well, and they basically did an A/B test. And I think these are sometimes the most beautiful tests because it's hypothesis, it's A/B. You try to take away some of the externalities. And they took one group of people who were just learning, traditional, I would say, a little bit old school way of teaching, lecture, students, and then, you go through. And then you have to self-select into an exam. Then you had another group that had that, but they were supplemented using Gnowbe in this case, but a digital learning platform. And they were able to then see if there was any difference in performance, confidence level, and the ability or sitting for the exam.
Yeah.
This group of people who had the digital learning experience, 50% more of these students ended up choosing to sit for the exam. So this was kind of interesting. So we said, why would that be the case? And then as we started to assert and understand using the data, it helped us to make better decisions to recognize that a surprising insight for us was that this mobile learning tool helps to improve people's confidence level.
Yeah.
Somehow, just learning the content but having it accessible in their pocket was making them feel more confident so that they would sit for the exam. So then confidence level is something now we are starting to track because we believe that a precursor to high performance is that I believe in myself and I believe that I can do it as kind of a predictive indicator. And I love, Raman, what you were saying about the predictive analytics and how that's a predictor then to high performance. And so, I think that one of the things with data, it points you in a direction, but sometimes it uncovers new things and you have to start to track or measure for performance. So, I think data is a critical part of better decision making.
Wonderful. So I think your example just takes us to the learner because on the one hand, we see what is needed from the business and we try to identify what are the elements or the metrics that we can work towards and design. And I'm going to ask you some few questions on how do we design the right intervention in a minute. But I want to now go to the learner. And every time I have conversations with learning leaders, there is this dilemma about how do we get the learner really active in the journey of learning. And when I speak to learners, I always get that sense that everyone just wants to learn and there is no challenge on the learner side. So I love to understand from you, how do we really, is there a gap? Because somewhere I'm not understanding. The learners really are eager to learn. They maybe need the confidence, they need the context. And all of us in L&D keep thinking that, how do I get my learners to really be active in the learning journey? So how do you solve this dilemma?
Would you like to start or should I? I'm happy to start.
Anywhere, Bitasta, you want to start first?
Yeah, then I love your question. I think it's such a smart question, but I think the tension you're seeing, it's actually, I think, comes to the root of why do the L&D folks feel that there is a challenge? Yeah. And why do learners feel that they would like to learn? And what is the content and the relevance and the level of personalization of that content? Yeah. So I think the reason why we see this mismatch is a lot to do with relevance. So of course I want to learn, but I only learn things that are relevant to me when I want to learn it and how I want to learn it. Yeah. So one of the things we did early on was we did research on different learner motivations and personas. Because we were building our product, we wanted to make sure we were not assuming that all learners are the same. Yeah. And of course, lo and behold, we found 6 different kinds of learner personas and motivations.
Yeah.
And we found that's actually the minority of learners just love to learn for learning's sake. That was the minority. So we found other learners who are motivated to learn because they want to get promoted, they want to achieve something, they want to help other people. These are people who love to share articles and videos because they are just sharers. You have other people who are the selective ones. So these are the people who pop, and this is my persona. I pop in and out of learning, and I pick and choose what I want when I want it, and I'm satisfied. I found it very valuable. So if you measure success of my learning based on my completion rate, it will appear that I failed because that I was not actually engaged. But if I'm that persona type, which is a selective persona, it's about empowering the individual adult learner to learn when they want, how they want, what they want. And so I might be very happy and satisfied with, engaging in sessions 1, 5, and 7. And I'm good. I'm willing to pay. I found it valuable. It was awesome for me because I got exactly what I needed. So I think we need to also redefine, in some ways, metrics of what is success. I think sometimes L&D will think, oh, my learners are not engaged because they didn't have 100% completion rate. And that's not true. So there's many reasons I think that you can think about of why that happens.
Wonderful.
So that's been our experience of actually helping to redefine, reframe. But also recognizing that relevance, personalization, context, accessibility are also really critical.
Wonderful. Thank you. Yes. Bitasta, you want to add, or Raman, you want to add a point on that as well?
Yeah, just a very a very quick one. I think what we are seeing in terms of the trend, and of course, many of us are fully well versed with the Fitzpatrick model. In the past, the relationship between the L&D organization and learner was such that if you had a bum on seat and if you had some feedback coming in from facilitators or the quality of food or or whatever that's called learning tourism. So as long as the needs were met, so you were happy to prepare a report and go to the business saying 79% of people who were nominated attended the program. And out of that, 86% actually liked the facilitator. They loved the food. They loved the conference facilities, and so on and so forth. And business would say, "Well done, you guys are absolutely brilliant." And of course, we are realizing that it is only an administrative check. So I'm not saying it should not happen, but it's just an administrative check. And soon we started to work, especially with our sales force and marketing force, in terms of saying, "Are you changing behavior? Is that leading to change in behavior?" And of course, we had some evidence of change in behavior. But we found out to our shock that just change in behavior does not lead to performance. So we're moving away from a position that we are not in the business of making people learn. That's not the business we are in. We are in the business of business, which has a performance expectation. The moment you put that lens on, then I think anything that you design, and based on what you said in terms of learner's profile, the uptake we are seeing is much more, because we are saying that, hey, if you want to grow your market share by 30%, if your brand has to be XYZ, or your supply chain has to be at a productivity levels, and so on and so forth, here are 3 things that must happen in your organization, and this is how you can do it. Now, that's a different conversation. So, because otherwise what happens is sometimes you go through a curriculum, there is a set of modules you need to do, and sometimes you don't see the relevance of it in terms of how does it make a difference to my job or my career or to my business, So I think very important for us as learning and OD dealer, sort of dealing with this in terms of leadership, in terms of relevance to business sort of targets. And most importantly, I think in today's world, this bum on seat concept is going away, because I think classroom sessions are disappearing very fast. So I think sort of learning which is paced at your need, learning which is available on the instruments or tech equipments you're familiar with, so be it mobile, be it iPad, or be it streaming somewhere. So that's how people are beginning to absorb it.
Yeah.
And finally, my final point on this is that, look, if you and I want to learn something today or want to fix something, we go onto Google and find it out.
Yeah.
So I think why should our learner in the business be any different?
Yeah. So I'm going to take your point and ask you, Bitasta, on this because I think what you mentioned, the last point, is that our employees are learning despite of the L&D team. So
yes.
Learning is anyway happening. So it's more about, is it something that we are designed and aligned to the business and really enabling that, or are they going to Google or TED Talks or wherever they may have an access, or even sometimes even paying for their own trainings on their own,
Yeah.
and themselves on their own. So how do we enable that? And I loved your point about change of behavior does not lead to performance. How do we really integrate the learning intervention with actually what it means to me at my work? And I would love to hear some example with us, and if you have from your previous organizations, on how do we really work on that learning transferability, or that learning, how do I say, the execution of that learning from behavior change, but actually also resulting in different outcome of my work.
So there are a couple of things, right? As a learner myself, Esther, I only learn when I think that I am short of something.
Yeah.
I don't know something, where I recognize that there is a gap, right? And then nowadays, it's like what Steve Jobs had done earlier is that the iPod. I just pick out the songs that I like. I don't have to buy the entire album, right? And when I don't want to be overcritical of the learning and development organization, but from my experience, I think we in earlier days, what Raman also mentioned, we were giving a plain vanilla learning program for all, and we were measuring ourselves by the wrong metrics, or metrics which were relevant then, but certainly definitely not relevant now. So the personalization of the learning modules is important. For example, if I'm going for a pitch, and I don't know that how do I pitch to a particular energy sector, then the learning module should be able to get me to that portion only, that song, that particular module, instead of giving me the whole spiel of how to negotiate with the industry, no matter what. So the personalization is being made, real nowadays with all the, with the existence and the innovation around all the digital platforms like Gnowbe, and there are other digital platforms as well. One of the examples, which I think the learning and development organization, we in HR, I believe we should work boundarylessly. We work that this is learning development, this is compensation, this is recruitment. But at the end of the day, we don't, as professionals, um, I would like to give the benefit of doubt to paucity of time. We don't necessarily see the big picture. We don't see how the talent acquisition will streamline into learning and development, streamline into rewards, and thereon and so forth. And that's where the connection and working with each other, even within the HR organization, becomes very, very critical.
Yeah.
Like for example, I give from one of my ex-organizations. They had globally, they had designed a program called First Time Managers Program. And a lot of resources had gone in developing the program, and also the execution of the program across, if you were to carry it out across different, places, with the hypothesis that our first-time managers really sucked at managing employees. So we were, talking about time management and all the tactical managerial skills. But at the end of the day, what we missed out is what the employees needed. Employees, when we were doing an attrition predictive modeling, we found that the retention of employees is the highest with the people who have the domain knowledge. So it's not, they are looking for support and hands-on help from their managers. And that does not necessarily mean that the managers need to go through an entire first-time manager course on time management and all those, scheduling skills. But what was required was domain knowledge, which was not even there in any of the modules. So, I find that we have to keep our ears close to the ground towards employees' need to make it more personalized. as well as years outside, so that we can help people understand what are the skill sets which are going to affect the employees to be able to cope for future business needs. So it has to work both ways, and we can forget days where L&D function just pick up their bags and with one deck and some of the pictures just getting reshuffled here and there and carrying out trainings. We need to redefine ourselves and be more. How shall I say, be more active and engaged with the people on the ground and be more knowledgeable with the knowledge outside. So we need to upskill ourselves too. That's my
Thank you for that example. And I'm going to come to all of you on how L&D needs to also unlearn and relearn in a minute. But I loved your example, and I want to also get the opportunity to have So-Young and Raman's point of view about how do we go about designing learning interventions. So I think we all have agreed that the intervention needs to be aligned to a problem or a business opportunity. So there has to be an alignment to the business. And then it's about changing behaviors, but we have also discussed that's not enough. It needs to really lead to performance. So with examples, if you could share an example, and what's interesting about the example is not the example alone, but also how did you go about designing an intervention, and how can we learn from that experience from you?
Sure. Yeah, so I can begin. I think I'm in the midst of designing a program for our general managers globally. So we have about 160 general managers in our line of business in Americas and in Europe and Asia.
Yes.
And one of so the problem statement is that our leaders, our GMs, are they ready to run a digital venture?
Yeah.
Are they prepared to actually, if they were working independently, can they lead a digital venture, a digital company? And if no, then what is required to run one? So I recently had sort of a discussion with my CEO who was in Singapore, and I said, so okay, what does success look like to you? And of course, we put some financial numbers saying I want XYZ billion dollars to appear in my P&L as part of these guys actually doing stuff, digitalizing from within first the organization, and then actually digitalizing in a way to capture commercial opportunities outside their current business model. So two expectations. So the way we are beginning to think now is that if that is the outcome my CEO wants, I want to list down, and I'm working with a global vendor, a very big name in the space, that what will predict that performance? What should these leaders be knowing or experiencing that will make them successful eventually to run digital ventures? And we are sort of surprised that things are not the same around the world. So, for example, what's happening in China is very different than what's happening in the US. So we need to take a segmented approach here in terms of even finding out what these GMs really need to know, because different economies and different places are moving in a different direction, although there are some common denominators across the digital space. And as we start to distill these predictors of performance, or the factors that will contribute to eventual performance, then I think you put a bit of a learner lens, or you start using methodologies which we are pretty clear with in terms of what style or what intervention which will work in terms of equipping or skilling up these folks on that front. Now, what we're also doing is that we want to make sure that the whole blended learning actually is taken down to supporting them when they go back to their workspace and start to do stuff. So that's where I think bulk of support is required. And while L&D says it is blended learning, but we find that post-classroom or post-virtual learning modules or curriculum, whatever is delivered, there is a significant drop in interest and interaction and follow-up and support, both from the line manager and then from us in HR. And I think the final piece, what we are now building also into the discussion is and very relevant, as I said, because you need to take an integrated HR view. So a talent lens is very crucial when you start to make these interventions, because you can't have one solution that fits all. So I think a segmented approach where some of our leaders might be actually quite ready, to jump in, and they can create great business opportunities. So we need to have a sort of an intervention which is paced differently. So we don't need to over-engineer for people who are already there. So I think it's just a small tipping that's required where they're going to step in. But there are people who have no clue. So we might have to sort of work with them in a different way. And then when you apply the talent lens and you slice and dice the data to sort of go back to your leadership saying, these folks first, because they are going to make the biggest difference to the business output that you're looking. So I think these are some of the new thinking which we are going to deploy. Wonderful. And there is a lot of support coming in terms of, yeah, this is what I want and this is what we're looking for. Yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Raman, for sharing that example and taking us through the design thinking of how you're doing the solutioning and how you're working with those GMs.
Yeah,
go ahead.
Yeah, maybe I can also add, I think to what Raman is saying, I think first, I think what you said spot on, which I agree with, is you must start with the purpose.
Yeah.
So before you're designing any intervention, it has to start with what are we trying to solve?
Yeah.
And I think too often we jump into the sexy topics like agile. Agile is really hot now. Everyone needs agile, but why? What do you need agile for? What is it going to help you? What kind of business results are you looking for as a result of having an agile mindset? Because then with adult learners, we need to provide context.
Yeah.
So I think having that why do I need to learn this is really important. So I think getting alignment around objective is a critical part of designing interventions.
Yeah.
And I think an example, even just to share with the example of blended learning, for example, I think, the research is overwhelming that after you finish a workshop, I think the latest research I heard 2 weeks ago was that 2.5 days after you finish a workshop, you lose everything.
Okay.
Unless it's applied.
Yeah.
That's remarkable, actually, because, we invest so much time and energy in training our people. So if the research in neuroscience is correct, that 2.5 days later, then how we actually do the application of that?
That's right.
So that how do we design the intervention so that it's not just about, so once you get the why, then you get the what. Then in terms of the application and the daily reinforcements, because we know that we're creatures of habit and we have to do things, some people say 20, 30, depending on who you talk to, but it's definitely more than 5 or 10, right? So you need about a certain number of days to get the daily application of that. And the intervention most powerful is actually when it's on the job and it's real. And so one of the things that we did with a group of leaders is we actually did a blended approach. You had the face-to-face leadership, then you had coaching in groups, and then it was followed up by digital learning. So it was kind of like multiple levels of intervention using multiple different techniques.
Yeah.
It's not a one-size-fits-all approach.
Yeah.
And then in that group, exactly like Raman said, you had some who were very advanced along their journey and some who were not. So the way that we thought about the intervention was to recognize that there's differences in levels of maturity or development of that capability. Then the learning objective is tailored to the group, to the person. So this group of people, their learning objective was not to learn the topic, but was to practice coaching and mentoring of those who may not. Whereas this group was actually there to learn the topic. So you have different kinds of, I would say, more custom and tailored approaches to even the learning interventions. Even if it's the same intervention, you can layer the intervention so that it's meeting multiple needs. Wonderful. And so I think the leveraging and the shared knowledge is a critical part of adult learning. So instead of segregating, these are the ones who are more mature, these are not, and separating them out, bringing them together, then we'll create a lot more of that shared experiences. Because on topic X, this person is more knowledgeable than this person, but on topic Y, it could flip on its head. So then how do you actually create a culture of shared learning and collaborative learning?
Thank you so much for that example. So we've have another 10 minutes to go, and I have 2 questions I want to make sure I cover. So Bitasta, this is coming to you because we have not yet touched, we have touched indirectly, but not directly, the whole point about leveraging technology and using technology for helping us not only design learning interventions, but also most importantly to execute learning interventions. When I speak to a lot of the learning leaders, there's also a little bit of fear about these not falling in the syndrome of shiny objects, saying that, everyone is doing something, so I must also do it. Should I not? So how do you approach decision making on investing in technology, and how do we make sure that we really leverage the power of technology to the best, and not just kind of thinking that technology is a silver bullet and all my problems will get solved if I just throw money on them? So what is your approach about leveraging the power of technology?
I have an approach as well as a point of view on technology. With the artificial intelligence, we think that the reskilling of workers can wait, but things are changing as we are speaking. So it's not that 30 years down the line it's going to have an impact. The point of view is, when technology is being implemented, let's take the robotics and the artificial intelligence and the entire deluge of technology innovations. It's moving at a much faster pace. And in some countries, the investment from a business point of view, the investment on robotics and artificial intelligence or any technology is a capital investment. Yeah. So while technology is being integrated in the workflow, which means that, if it's integrated in the workflow with the objective of more efficiency, more productivity, that means less people on the job, it's actually replacing a lot of people. And that's the reality. It's replacing a lot of people, and different jobs are emerging, but the jobs are emerging are far less than the number of jobs which are being replaced, right? So from an economic point of view, and the personal tax, the countries which are collecting personal tax, they are losing a fair share of their tax revenue income because people are getting redundant. And the capital investment tax is far lower than the personal income tax. So what that means is, in reality, and I'll connect why I'm talking about this. What means is, the reality is the capital investment tax is less than the personal income tax collected, and more people are getting dependent on social welfare. So if more people are getting social welfare, it actually is quite a challenge for the economic and social cohesion, which I talked about earlier. Now, human resources, the technology, when we are talking about, it's also, there are two things that HR people need to manage. One is, how do we not just surrender to technology, but look at our workforce and see what, in GE we used to do with Greenbelt and Lean, as to how can we make the process more efficient. And if that means that we can digitize a few portions of the process, that's great. So one is digitalization of the workflow and the process, and hence you buy technology. What I see happening, you said that most organizations are not investing in technology because others are doing, but my experience is just the opposite. Most organizations are actually investing in technology because, especially HR technology, because others are doing it. Yeah, and I think that there has been, there is a flaw in that thinking, because not the entire suite of technology is required for all countries, for all management of human resource processes across the world. So one needs to identify what part or what module of the technology do we need to make our lives a little more efficient and productive, and so on and so forth. And also there are local solutions. There are a lot of HR technology firms which are customized, which are customizable, which are in the ecosystem. So I think we need to look very closely at what are we trying to solve with the technology. If we can digitalize it in-house, we should definitely do it. That will also give us the satisfaction of using our brain, but also, it will also be a cheaper and more reasonable option than to buy the entire suite of, modules from an SAP Workday or ADP and not using it at the end of the day. But what is more important is, with technology, is how are we capturing the data? We make sure that the data which is input is very, very, it's clean to begin with, so that we can use that data to do some analytics which will help us in better decision making. So we should just try and build our capability in data management as well as analytics, and use more personalized, digitalized workflow, and we should use technology in more personalized way rather than saying the global team is doing it, and so we need to kind of do it in all countries, everywhere, without a shred of understanding how to go about it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, wonderful. Okay, any other comments on the technology buying process, but very quick?
No, I think very quickly from a learning portfolio perspective, when we deploy technology, I think the absolutely the relevance to what we're trying to learn and what we're trying to achieve has to be there. So, for example, we were very keen that we build scenario-based learning for our folks. And when we found that our millennials, especially the younger workforce, like to play, they like to be part of a game.
Yeah.
We gamified the scenarios. And it was scalable because it could be reached from any part of the world at any time you wanted. It was virtual on your iPad or on your phone. We used data analytics to then to sort of course, to track how learners were picking it up.
Yeah.
And wherever they were getting stuck in the game, we had people to actually help them. So I think in this way, we found the uptake, of course, was good. But I think we found also through surveys that people were actually playing scenarios, and these were like trade-off scenarios. Should I increase the price? Should my supply chain costs go up? Should I spend more money on ad revenue, and so on and so forth?
Yeah.
When you put people in these situations and then they play it, of course, it has a direct relation with how they will actually go back and do stuff at their workplace.
Yeah, wonderful. Thank you. Good. So I have a couple of last questions, and I think we covered before the requirement for L&D leaders themselves to reskill. So what would be your recommendation about what are the top skills that definitely L&D leaders need to be building as they prepare themselves for the future to be more relevant themselves as business accelerators? What will be those skills that are very, very important for all of us in the L&D community to build on?
I think it was actually very similar, to I think what was shared earlier.
Yeah.
Around really, really hardcore critical thinking and business strategy, and I think being the ability, and I'm going to kind of call it two prongs. If there's two parallel processes here. I think one is to have a seat at the table. You have to understand business strategy, and and how to drive performance. What are the performance drivers of the business? And to be able to talk numbers. Yeah. And so we often hear, oh, I'm an HR person, I'm an L&D, I don't like numbers. I went into this space because I don't like numbers. But if you're in business, you have to know numbers, because numbers are the language, the alphabet, if you will, for business. So I think understanding, a P&L, cash flow statements, market valuation and what drives market value, I think are very important, especially if you're in a larger company. So I would say that's number one. And secondly, is actually the ability to communicate at an executive level.
Yeah.
And to be able to communicate in a top-down, clear, concise way on the things that matter without getting without sharing too much detail, but only the detail that's recognized, that's valuable for decision making. And so I think that if an L&D person is able to develop those skills, then when they have the seat at the table, they will be able to build credibility and be heard.
Yeah.
So I think sometimes, in some ways, the function, the where it came from, may not necessarily have those skills to manage your team, let's say, are different than the skills managed to really have a strategic place, whether it's in front of a board or a C-suite.
Yeah.
And so those are two critical capabilities that are often in many organizations missing.
Yeah.
They think it's actually just about learning, design, and people, which is important. I mean, those are functional things, but I think there's another level of capabilities required.
Wonderful. Great. So Bitasta, you want to add anything else on that skill? I'm coming to you, Raman, in a minute.
Yeah, I think the business knowledge, not only in terms of the financials, but what's happening in the energy sector, what's happening, the external business knowledge is very critical. What's happening in the market. And also what I mentioned earlier is an ear to the ground. I think we also need to be like an L&D business partner to the employees. Most often we are in the back room and just doing, but the interaction with the employee gives you a direct sense of what is really required at the ground level.
Absolutely.
So we need to be more accessible, more reachable, as well as we need to have a very, very good understanding of the industry, so to speak.
Yeah.
And yeah, those adding to what So-Young has just said. Yeah.
Thank you. So Raman, I'm gonna please feel free to add one or two more competencies, but I'm gonna request you to think through and help us visualize. Imagine that you are the CEO of this community called L&D, and you have to design a learning intervention for all of us who are your consumers, who are the learning leaders. What will you suggest? Because we're talking about critical thinking, business strategy, context of our industry, we're talking about ability to communicate, functional skills. What kind of learning intervention you will design for us?
Great question. So I think let me first add to the previous discussion, the wonderful discussion going on. So just a couple of months back, I was at a L&D conference as a speaker, and there were about 60 or 70 folks there. And I asked them, I said, so how much did your company make money? You know, how much money did your company make last month? Can you please put your hand up?
Yeah.
There was not one hand up in that room.
Oh.
I said, who are your top 5 customers?
Yeah.
Not a hand went up. What is the unit cost of production? And so on and so forth. So I asked almost 10 questions, which were absolutely from the business. Yeah.
Yeah. Critical.
And then I asked them, I said, how come you don't know about this? I said, do you have access to data and information and analysis, which is business? Very few hands went up.
Yeah.
So because either you don't have a seat at the table or you don't look at that information, you go and end up designing stuff which justifies your job actually. Because you want people to come to your programs, and you want, okay, these guys look busy, but I'm wondering whether it is productive, you know. So I think that's sort of in addition to what I heard, and I think I completely agree with it. Yeah. Now, if I were, you know, heading an organization which sort of builds programs, and I think if I look at just 3 of you, and if you were to say, okay, come up with something for me, I would be spending a lot of time with the 3 of you. Actually, what matters to you? Which part of your performance you are trying to improve, and why is it important, and how are you going to measure it? So, for example, if you wish to scale up this this is a virtual online chat with leaders that you're doing, and if you want to sort of improve that, then I will start asking questions. So, what are you going to do? How do you want to scale up? Who do you want to sort of meet up? And how does it link up to the revenues you want to build, or your brand, or any other objective you might have? So, I think once that is clear, and sometimes it's easier said than done. The performance consulting around that space, I think, is the weakest link in the L&D community. Yeah, that's the weakest link, because we just assume when business leader calls and says there is a problem, go and fix it, design something.
Yeah,
we are in such an obligatory sort of a position that we don't question. So, can you help me understand what is the problem?
Yeah,
I think that's those would be the guiding principles of me trying to design, if at all, anything for you, Esther.
Wonderful. Oh, I'm loving that conversation. Maybe we'll have to take that offline as well. Good. So as we're closing the show, and I think it's been fascinating, and I've learned so much just listening to the 3 of you, and I'm sure our listeners will benefit tremendously from that experience and that authenticity of sharing. So very quickly, one thing that you will, and I think somehow we've summarized it somewhere, but I think it's very powerful if I ask you to say one thing that you will like us to stop doing as L&D heads or as L&D leaders in this community, and one thing you would like us to start doing, and that's something actionable that immediately as we log off of this program, that could be something that it's very practical for all of us who are listening to you. One thing to stop doing, one thing to start doing, but very brief.
So I think I'll go first. One thing to stop is stop churning programs and curriculums, you know.
Yeah.
And what you should start doing is spend more time with your business partners and your customers and externally outside to really find out what will move the dot.
Wonderful, Raman. Thank you.
I would say, I was going to say the same thing, but since Raman said it, I have to change. So I think the one thing I would say is stop think incrementally about what I have and how I build based on what I have, and start thinking in a more disruptive manner of based on where I want to go, start with a clean sheet approach to thinking about technology and technology adoption.
Thank you. Thanks, Ian. Bitasta?
I think one thing I would love to then, L&D professionals to do is think based on evidence. So just see and be a little more, what's the word, conversant with data. And, what are the things which have helped you, which are the programs which have yielded you good business results. And look at the data to design the future programs. But do integrate with, do talk to different silos in HR, do talk to the customers like Raman said, and do invest in yourself to be more knowledgeable.
Wonderful. Thank you so much once again for sharing your experiences, your advice, and I think it's been fantastic and meaningful. Thank you, So-Young, Bitasta, Raman. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks very much.
Thanks everyone for joining us.
Take care.
And we look forward to hosting you next week.
Bye-bye.
Have a great day, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.